Hello students, how are you? In the previous video we had completed the chapter reproduction in plants. Okay, I hope all the things that we discussed are clear to you. If not, then you can watch the videos again. In this video students, we will be discussing some keywords and what you have learned. Okay, so let's start with the keywords. First is asexual reproduction. We discussed that asexual reproduction, it is the type of reproduction in which single parent is involved and there is no fusion of the gametes. Okay. Second, budding. You know, budding, it is a type of asexual reproduction. We were looking of example of budding in yeast, and I told you that small buds grow on the body of the yeast, and after some time the buds grows and get detached from the body and then give rise to a new individual. Okay, sometimes there may be the chains of buds, they may be formed, and that leads to multiple daughters or the multiple progeny formed. Okay. Next is embryo. After the fertilization process in the sexual reproduction, a zygote is formed and the zygote develops to form embryo. Fertilization, you all know the fusion of male and female gamete, that is the male part of the plant, and the female part, that is pollen grain, is the male part, and female part is the ovum or egg, and the fusion of these two, it is fertilization. Next is fragmentation, another type of asexual reproduction. It occurs in the algae, for example Spirogyra. I told you that the organism, it breaks into fragments and then each fragment grows into a new individual. Gametes, you know, the male and female part which gets fused to form zygote, these are known as gamete. Like the male gamete is pollen grain and female gamete is ovum or egg. Next is hypha. Hypha occurs in fungi. Okay. Ovule, you all know, it is inside the ovary and it consists, or it has the main part of female reproductive system, that is the egg. Next come pollen grain. Pollen grain, it becomes mature and form male gamete, after which the male gamete fuses with the egg cell to form zygote. Pollen tube. See, when the pollen grain lands on the stigma of the flower, then they germinate and reaches to the ovum, where they fuse with the ovum and fertilize it. Next is pollination. You all know the transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma, it is known as pollination. Seed dispersal. When the seeds are formed, so that seed, the same kind of tree can be grown or can grow in different conditions, that's why the seed dispersal occur. Okay, it can be occur with the help of wind, water or animals. Next is sexual reproduction. You know, sexual reproduction, in this two types of parents are required and the fusion of male and female gamete occurs. These are the two very important things and also the difference from the asexual reproduction. Then comes the spore. I told you during some unfavorable conditions spores are formed which are very resistant to high temperature, winds, etc. means they are resistant to the unfavorable conditions. Okay, and as soon as the favorable condition arise, these spores give rise to new organism. Sporangium, these spores are born on sporangium. Vegetative propagation, another type of reproduction that is asexual. And finally the zygote. You all know the result of the sexual reproduction, or you can say the fusion, it is the zygote. I told you the life starts from the single cell and that single cell is called zygote. It is formed after the fusion of male and female gametes. Clear? So these are the keywords. I hope all the keywords are clear to you. Next we will be starting what you have learned. So let's start what you have learned. All organisms multiply or reproduce their own kind. Okay, you all know that all organisms, they give rise to the organism of their own kind, means it means that they are similar to them. The progeny, the offspring that are formed are similar to the parent. Okay, that's why it is saying that all organisms multiply or reproduce their own kind. Next, in plants there are two modes of reproduction, asexual and sexual. When you are starting the chapter, I told you these two types of reproduction method, that was asexual and the sexual method. Third, there are several methods of asexual reproductions. What are these? Fragmentation, budding, spore formation, and vegetative propagation. We have discussed these all. For example, fragmentation, when the organism divides into fragment and each fragment grows into a new individual. Spore formation, for example, spore formed during unfavorable condition, and when the favorable condition arises, then the spore give rise to new organism. Budding, we discussed it in the yeast also, that small buds arise from the body, and after growing for some time they detach and give rise to new individual. So these are the different types of methods of asexual reproduction, such as fragmentation, budding, spore formation, and vegetative propagation. Next, sexual reproduction involves the fusion of male and female gametes. This is the first and important thing of the sexual reproduction, and the first difference between sexual is asexual. Okay, in asexual the fusion does not takes place, whereas in sexual reproduction the fusion of male and female gametes occur. Okay, so I hope that it is clear that male gamete is the pollen grain, or it is developed inside the pollen grain, and female gamete inside the ovule, that is the egg. Next, in vegetative propagation, new plants are produced from different vegetative parts such as leaves, stems, and roots. Okay, when we are discussing the chapter, I told you there are two kinds of part, vegetative part and the reproductive part. The flower is considered to be a reproductive part, and the rest of the things like leaves, stems, roots, etc., they are considered to be the vegetative part. When in the process of reproduction, other parts, for example leaves, stems, and roots, they take part in reproduction, then that part of and that kind of reproduction, or you can say new formation, is known as vegetative propagation. And when flower takes part in reproduction, then that is known as sexual reproduction. Okay, next, flower is the reproductive part of a plant. A flower may be unisexual with either the male or the female reproductive parts. Okay, I told you what is the male part, that is the anther, and the female part is the style, that is pistil. Okay, stigma, style, and ovary, it consists of. So if either one of them is present, then that is unisexual, means single sex organ is present, either male or either female. But a bisexual flower has both male and female reproductive parts. Clear? What is the difference between unisexual and bisexual flower? A unisexual flower has either the male or the female reproductive parts, and the bisexual flower has both male and female reproductive parts. Next, the male gametes are found inside the pollen grains, and female gametes are found in the ovule. Very important part, that the male gametes are found inside the pollen grains, and the female gametes, they are found in the ovule. Pollination is the process of transfer of pollen grains from the anther of one flower to the stigma of the same or another flower. Very important. Many times the definition is being asked, that what is pollination. So pollination is the process of transfer of pollen grains from anther of one flower to the stigma of the same or another flower. Next, after the definition of pollination, the pollination is of two types, self-pollination and cross-pollination. In self-pollination, pollen grains are transferred from anther to the stigma of the same flower. Okay, so maybe on the same flower, then it is. And in cross-pollination, the pollen grains are transferred from anther of one flower to the stigma of another flower of the same kind. Clear? Next, pollination takes place in plants with the help of wind, water, and insects. Okay, there are different kinds of pollen grains. Sometimes if they are feathery, then it is carried out with the help of wind. If they are able to float, okay, then they are carried out with the help of water. And if they are sticky in nature, then they stick on the animals, and they are carried with the help of animals or insects. After the pollination, the next process is fertilization. What is fertilization? The fusion of male and female gametes is called fertilization. Okay. Next, Fertilized egg is called a zygote, and zygote develops into an embryo. You already know that. The fertilization, it is the male and female gametes when fused, that is fertilization, and after fertilization the product that is formed is zygote, and after the zygote is formed it develops with the help of nutrients and forms embryo. Fruit is the mature ovary, whereas ovule develops into a seed which contains the developing embryo. Okay, I told you afterwards when the fertilization process occurs, all the parts of the flower fall off. Ovule, it results in the formation of seed, and the ovary, it results in the formation of fruit. Then after seed is formed, the seed dispersal is aided by wind, water and animals. Seed dispersal helps the plants to prevent overcrowding, avoid competition for sunlight, water and minerals, and invade new habitats. So it is the important functions of seed dispersal. Clear? So these are the points that what you have learned. I hope now the chapter is clear. In the next video, students, we will be discussing the exercise question of this chapter. Okay. Till then, you keep studying. Take care of yourselves. Thank you and have a nice day.